the expectation of satisfaction from the trip is a given. You know, we expect clean toilets. I think Sam Ham was saying it. A lot of those is intuitive, but when you dig into that research for a bit, it's worthwhile taking a moment to have a look at it. Test your own expectations of whether or not you think that's important to your customer. Because I think, as Alexandra said, the transformation happens when the operator says, that's what I think is important, and then you have a look at what the customer actually considers really important versus the satisfaction. What we've got to make sure we understand is that we're delivering at least on what their expectation is. But if we want to get into the social realm, we want them talking about us, not just saying that was good. You're either going to do that in the frustration or in the delight, and you want to be in the delight. So how do you start to create delighters out of your customers? How do you make sure that you do more than just meet their expectations, that you exceed their expectations? They know they're going in a helicopter, that's a given. So how am I going to exceed that expectation and not get into a situation where I say, I could have got that at a lower price? So the value isn't perceived, and Sam talked before about his perception of the value. One was worth a lot more than he paid for it, and one was about what he expected. So it's about what he thought what he paid for it. Which one would he talk about? Definitely the one that delivered the greater value. It isn't just about price. We do get caught up on price, but the world isn't just about price. Paul, I haven't picked on you yet, so I'm going to pick on you now. The Barrier Reef is more than just people who take you out to have a look at coral and fish. It's a whole landscape. It's a place in which people are journeying to and through, and as a provider of the journey to and through, how do you start to talk about the story of the Barrier Reef? What are your expectations of your customers' thoughts about their Barrier Reef experience and the contribution that you're going to make to that?
Thank you.
Not really.
Yeah, I'm from Sealink. We operate ferries to Magnetic Island, Townsville, and to Palm Island, a very unique group of islands to our north. I'll just make a couple of things. I'm not too sure if I'm going to answer the direct question. Some of you have probably been involved with the Italian honeymoon series, the Panorama groups. And I'll just relay a quick, because it relates to a couple of other people, what they've said. On Kangaroo Island, because I come from a business that's based in Adelaide, we deliver a product through what's called Kangaroo Island Odyssey. And it's the #1 market leader, and these groups actually come through Cairns as well. But it's a market leader in the Italian honeymoon sector. And what it does to ensure that it delivers, it over-delivers, is that, one, the guides are spectacular, and they speak in language, so they speak Italian. Two is they carry the Italian coffee machine maker, and to deliver an Italian coffee sitting on a cliff top observing Australian nature is one of those memorable moments that you talked about. It's what I sort of remember from my university days called a peak experience. People never forget.
Rob's nodding down here. Yeah.
And so I think that's what that landing on the helicopter, and that's what the guide thing was, and it's about us all having that as part of our business. I'll get to sort of where we're going with Sealink, but the other thing I just wanted, in terms of theme, Patricia and Stephanie and I are working with a number of authorities in Townsville, because we have a very strong education cluster with Groompa and AIMS and Reef HQ, Turtle Hospitals, those sorts of agencies. And where we're going is around this whole, what I think is a really important trend for world tourism, and Robbie and I and Rod and a few others have been around long enough to know sort of where's the market's going. But I really love this idea at the moment around responsible tourism. And I think the reef and our part of the world, the Townsville community and beyond down into the Whitsundays, has a great opportunity to develop the idea of responsible tourism. And I just made a few notes that, you know, education is about inspiration, care, responsibility, learning and vacation. And following that education responsibility angle, what we're talking about is sort of reef assessments, coral research, reef aquaculture, reef guardian projects,
Yep.
Turtle hospital, turtle release,
Yeah.
volunteerism, you know,
Yeah.
the work angle of being on the reef. People today go and visit Mother Teresa, and they go and visit destinations around the world where they feel there's a purpose.
They can make a contribution.
They can make a contribution.
Yeah.
And I think that, in a way, I don't know the Cairns community well enough, but perhaps that's an area that right along the Barrier Reef that we could develop something really quite significant, because
Yeah.
it's not other parts of the world. I mean, I think the Great Barrier Reef has been a market leader
Yep.
for many years, but it's probably been caught up, like you said. I mean, Ningaloo Reef and those, that was a great slide, that one, what's different about what we deliver.
Yep.
And maybe the idea that the reef is the picking fruit project.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, kids today want to come and earn dollars and experience. The reef can provide a lot of that sort of stuff and can be a market leader again in responsible tourism.
Absolutely. Well, I'm hoping that Joe Davies, are you on the phone? No. Conservation volunteers were going to join us, and I think that's something, that's a connection that's really worth making in the work that you do, and I'm happy to help you to bring that side of the story together. There's an enormous amount of work that goes into making voluntourism and conservation volunteering work, and Joe from CVA is really committed to making that work and really committed to a project in the Great Barrier Reef. Just hasn't yet found the partnership to make it work, so you might just have found the partner to get you there. So I think I might have cut you off though. You were about to jump into Sea-Link? No?
No,
you're good.
From a business point of view, I suppose it is about the story.
Yeah.
And we are actually just trying to create the story, and I just relay just one brief thing. Again, different ways to use the reef. We have a wonderful sailing event, part of the Queensland season of sailing, and I just recall, you know, late afternoon sunset with the sun setting on the across the mountains of Magnetic Island, looking across the magnificent World Heritage Zone of the Great Barrier Reef with the aqua blue water, and saying to the 500 people who were there, welcome to Magnetic Island, part of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Zone. And I think that moment, when you look, you can have that experience that we talked about, memorable moment, in a whole variety, a bunch of ways.
Absolutely, yeah. And allowing that to stick with the customer, to have them say, and there I was looking out over the World Heritage Marine Park with the sun setting.
To train the 70-odd staff that we have to deliver a tourism experience and not a transport product.
Yeah, absolutely. A perfect lead-in to the bit that I want to talk about next, which is once you've spent the time, particularly with your teams, to think about that theme, articulating it. You might not have the words absolutely right. It takes some time to get that right. But the next exercise is one that I encourage you to go through, and it picks up on exactly that point. It starts to articulate, well, if I've got a good theme, I need some strong pillars for that theme to be built upon. You can use these pillars here of the Great Barrier Reef to ask yourself a couple of questions. How could I incorporate those rich encounters into the story that I tell? You could be talking about the whale highway that is underneath you. I heard a great story from a whale researcher about whale idol. Young male whales travelling up through the Barrier Reef, trading tunes as they go. By the time they've reached Samoa, there is one hit song, and they sing it to each other. So on the way back, there's only one tune. On the way up, there's 10 different songs. And on the way back, there's only one hit song. I think it's Gangnam Style for whales. We won't go any further. I'm not doing the dance. But what a great story to be talking about as you're looking down to say, keep your eye out for whales. There's a whale idol contest going on right underneath your feet. You don't even need to see it. I think the guys, Adam and Alan and I were talking about the Ningaloo Reef experience. You don't always get to swim with a whale shark, and yet somehow you feel so connected to that moment, and it feels so special that whether you saw them or not, it's kind of irrelevant. You still feel like you're part of something truly special. So how can you incorporate those encounters into your product? How does the research that we undertake, all of this knowledge that we have about the reef and its conservation, how do I build that into the story that I tell to my customers? Not boring them with detail and dissertation, but how do I turn that into a story that allows them to understand that we care more than anybody else here about this reef system, that we are investing the time and energy to make sure that it is going to be here for future generations. I think the word Rod was using before was about confidence. Have confidence in my product and have confidence in us as managers of this unique asset. You're looking out on this beautiful marine park, know that we're looking after it with some of the most extensive research and some of the reef guardians that Paul mentioned. How am I exceeding the customer's expectations, and how do I take the product range and choice, which sounds a little bit about my least favourite word in marketing, which is diversity, and how do I turn that into what's in it for me? So there's a couple of pillars that you could use with your team, some questions you could ask them, which are very much like the ones that Russell mentioned before. If we're going to do interpretation really well, we have to understand, what do we want my customer to go away with? What do I want my staff to say to them? If there's one thing I want them to say or do when they're there in that moment, what is it? How do I make sure that I understand what sets me apart from others in the Great Barrier Reef and other experiences globally? I won't get you to do it now. I'll get you to take that exercise away and sit down with your team and go through it. It might take you 20 minutes or half an hour to have a brainstorm at a staff get-together, but I tell you, it is invaluable to making that story stick, and you should be able to see the results through the stories that your customers tell about you. The last thing we want to talk about today is reimagining. We always talk about reinventing or reinvesting, and that all costs money. Reimagining can be something you can do at virtually no cost at all. Rob's a Taswegian. He can probably tell this story better than I can, but my first experience of Port Arthur was a great day out, some beautiful heritage buildings and a pretty good guide. I went back 5 years later and spent some more time there, and they'd reimagined their experience, and they tied me to a person, and I saw that person's life through that system, and it totally changed the way I thought about the place. I then went back for the night experience, and a couple of little tricks in the night experience made all the difference. You know, I'm sure I walked past a little trigger that switched a light on in the doctor's residence, and then it went straight off again. And my wife said to the guide, "Oh, I think the light came on." He said, "Oh, people say that all the time. They reckon the place is haunted." It's not, but don't worry about it, just keep going. And then the story unfolded about the surgeon and his wife and their life on the site. And somehow you get an eerie feeling. I still get it now. I still get goosebumps thinking about that moment. Just a little trigger in my mind was all that it took. A tiny reimagining of that place took it from a nice place that I would have shown some photographs of to a story that I tell. Most times people talk about jails or heritage or places that make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. So reimagining can be more than pouring money in. They didn't have to pour millions in, but they did spend a bit of time and energy with Sam Ham getting the story right. So if you start to reimagine the experiences that you offer and using those pillars that we talked about to embed those in the stories, you can reimagine a reef from a helicopter. You can reimagine what it's like to be under on the personal reef device. You can start to get your customer to think about you differently without having to spend a lot of money. And we use these hero experiences to help you kind of tie into that. You can snorkel and sail anywhere, but can you learn to snorkel, sail and dive safely in one of the 7 wonders of the world? You can see Nemo in lots of places. You can see small fish on coral. But can you see the charismatic mega marine life, the Great 8, the equivalent of our Big 5? You can see a natural event. You might see a turtle hatch out of an egg in Micronesia. But can you be part of one of the biggest and best natural events anywhere on the planet, like the coral spawning? Or know that the whale migration and the turtle hatching is happening in a protected marine park and could happen for generations to come without fear? That's what we want you to start thinking about, those hero experiences. I won't go through all of them, but seeing the islands and reef stretch as far as the eye can see can remind you that you are looking at the largest living organism on the planet. How do you turn that into a story? Take a fact and figure and turn it into a story that your customer walks away with. Personalise it, humanise it, and bring that story to life.